Hey guys, tonight we're headed somewhere quiet, really quiet. You shuffle through a narrow, frost-dusted path winding between hedgerows, the kind where your boots sink just slightly into the mud with each step, and the only sound is the gentle tink-tink of sheep bells in the distance. Ahead, tucked behind a crooked wooden gate and a surprisingly intimidating hedgehog-shaped stone statue, is your destination, a small 13th century monastery. Not a grand cathedral, not a shining Gothic stronghold of theological debate, just a sleepy little monastery where the most exciting thing happening tonight is the counting of sheep, literally. And yes, you probably wouldn't survive here, not because it's dangerous, but because your modern brain might slowly unravel trying to tally 37 sheep without saying the word 37. Oh, and you're not allowed to sneeze near the abbot's tally sticks. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments. Are you counting sheep in Sydney or sipping tea in Toronto? Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge through the monastery's wooden gate. It creaks dramatically, which feels a little excessive for something that mostly keeps chickens from wandering into the vegetable patch. You're greeted not by a monk, but by a sheep, a very judgmental-looking sheep. Its wool is marked with a red smudge, painted, not accidental, and it stares at you as if to say, "I've been numbered, have you?" A novice monk appears moments later, hood up, hands tucked into his robe, sandals coated in dust. He gestures for you to follow. No words, just the slight dip of the head and a turn toward the main hall. You're led past a garden that smells faintly of sage and turnips, then around the corner to a low-roofed stone barn. Inside, more sheep. Dozens. All marked, all murmuring softly in the dim light. The monk pulls out a small wooden board. It looks like a weird abacus had a baby with a waffle. Little grooves, tiny pegs. He moves one, then another, counting under his breath in Latin. Unus, duo, tres. You don't know much Latin, but the rhythm of it is oddly soothing, like a Gregorian chant version of a spreadsheet. This is how they count the sheep. Not just once, mind you, multiple times. In the evening, in the morning, after storms, before feasts. Sheep were valuable, not just for wool, but for parchment, meat, and sometimes for symbolic reasons no one fully explains. And so counting them wasn't a chore, it was a ritual. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Medieval monasteries often served as centers of agriculture and livestock management. Monks raised sheep for wool production, and accurate record-keeping was a spiritual and economic necessity. And your quirky tidbit? Some monasteries gave each sheep a name, usually after saints, so you'd have an entire flock of Saint Benedicts and Saint Catherines wandering around baaing with holy indignation. You glance around the barn. There's one particularly fluffy ewe with a bell so big it nearly drags on the floor. Her name is probably Gertrude, or possibly Moses. The monks didn't always gender match names in sheep. The monk beside you finishes his count, moves a final peg. Quadragenta octo, he whispers, 48 sheep. He sighs, relieved. You think that's the end of the ritual. It's not. Now comes the chant. He steps outside, rings a small handbell. Other monks begin to emerge from corners of the monastery like gentle, candlelit ghosts. Each carries a similar board, each heads toward a different corner of the property. Because tonight isn't just for counting sheep. Tonight, everything gets counted. Wool sacks in the storage room, candles in the chapel, fish in the pond, manuscripts in the scriptorium. And yes, sacks of turnips. You're gently roped into helping, handed a board of your own. The monk points to the apple barrels in the cellar and raises an eyebrow. A test. You nod solemnly. Begin counting. You lose track at vigenti septa, 27. You start again. Twice. By the time you finish, the other monks are returning, Boards filled with pegs and patterns that look weirdly like constellations. You hand yours over, unsure if you passed. The monk gives you the faintest of smiles. A sheep bleats. You jump. The judgmental one has returned. It licks your board. You might never feel clean again. But here's something historians still argue over. Were these rituals purely practical, or were they a form of numeric The morning comes softly. Not in golden rays or triumphant birdsong. This is a monastery after all, not a fairy tale. The light here creeps. It seeps through high, narrow windows, draping the stone in a pale wash that's more candlelight than sunbeam. You wake curled on a straw mattress in the guest corner of the dormitory, the smell of beeswax and parchment in the air. Somewhere a bell rings, a low, hollow note, not to wake you, just to mark the hour. Which hour? That depends entirely on who's counting. You stretch, creak, and wander toward the scriptorium, guided by the sound of quills scratching and sandals brushing stone. The door creaks as you enter. It always creaks, probably on purpose. Inside, 3 monks are bent over tables, copying lines of Latin text with alarming precision. One of them looks up, gives a tiny nod, then returns to measuring the distance between 2 inked letters with the handle of his quill. This is where the numbers are born. Not just written, but measured, designed, and sometimes invented. You walk to the far table where a monk in forest green robes, a rare splash of color, is busy carving not letters but symbols. Tiny curves and hooks, some that look vaguely familiar. Roman numerals, yes, but also something else. He looks up. Numeri monastici, he says with a grin. Monastic numbers. You lean in. The parchment is filled with symbols. Dots, slashes, and what looks suspiciously like tiny sheep heads. Some correspond to Latin numbers. Others, he explains in hushed tones, are for internal records only. One symbol means 1 portion of salted butter. Another? Candle stub usable. You stare. He shrugs. We count what we use. It's oddly beautiful. Here's your mainstream historical fact. While most monks used Roman numerals for formal records, they often developed their own shorthand systems, marks, tallies, or abbreviations for everyday inventory and internal communication. And your quirky tidbit? Some of these systems were never meant to be read outside the monastery, secret symbols. Not because they hid anything scandalous, but because they were efficient. You don't need a full Latin sentence to say, Brother Hugo took 3 fish and a candle. The monk shows you a small wooden board next, a kind of primitive calculator. A counting table, etched with columns and grooves. He slides small bone markers along it. Each move clicks softly. Sheep, 1 column. Wool, another. Sins, a row all to themselves. He lets you try. You promptly confuse wool bales with rain barrels emptied. He gently corrects you with a tap of the stylus. The room remains hushed. Not silent. There's always movement, always murmur, but it's the kind of quiet that lives, like the parchment is listening. You notice a wax tablet tucked under another monk's elbow. Not a writing tablet, a number tablet. He flips it open to reveal rows of tiny notches and grooves. Some rubbed smooth by use, others sharp and fresh. This is their draft ledger. Before things get immortalized in ink and vellum, they live briefly here in wax, mutable, reversible, forgiving, like divine math in practice. You press a finger gently into one groove. It's warm. He smiles, lifts the stylus, and quickly etches a symbol beside it. Guest, 1 meal, half loaf. You're officially part of the count. Historians still argue whether these wax and tally systems were born of necessity or preference. Some suggest it was about efficiency. Others think it was ritual, to feel the numbers, to mold them like prayer beads. You suspect both. Because it doesn't feel cold. It feels devotional. Not in a loud kneel-on-stone kind of way, but in the soft, steady scratch of quill to parchment. In the patient way Brother Greenrobes adjusts a decimal point, then re-inks it anyway. In the fact that someone, somewhere, made a sacred numeral for a usable candle stub. The math here doesn't chase profit. It doesn't fear audit. It's just trying to reflect the world, line by patient line. By mid-morning, you've seen more counting systems than you thought existed. Pebbles in bowls, carved bone rods, knotted cords, yes, cords, tied with precise patterns, passed from one monk to another like medieval spreadsheets. One of them shows you a cord with 6 knots, apples.
You're halfway through a modest breakfast, half a loaf of dark rye, a thumb of goat cheese, and a cup of something that could politely be called herbal, when Brother Alric appears. He's round in the way only a man who works with books and butter can be. His robes are patched with careful embroidery, little vine patterns stitched into the sleeves, which makes him look less like a monk and more like someone who could sing to bees. He doesn't say much, just gestures for you to follow. You oblige, wiping crumbs from your tunic as you trail him around the herb garden and down a narrow path behind the monastery. At the end of the trail is a gate. Beyond the gate, a pasture. And in that pasture, sheep. So many sheep. They're scattered like woolen clouds across the grass, grazing in lazy arcs. Some wear bells, some wear smudges of red or blue dye. A few are conspicuously clean and look offended about it. Brother Alric sighs. He pulls from his belt not a ledger, not a tablet, but a scroll. Unrolls it with flair. On it, columns, names, symbols. Today, he says softly, we count souls. He's not being poetic. These sheep, they're registered. Each has a number, a mark, and, in many cases, a name. You blink at the scroll. There they are. Agnes, Balthasar, Clovis, Dulcinea, and so on, alphabetically. He hands you a small slate. Your job, spot, count, and match names to markings. You squint into the pasture. A sheep stares back. Is it Dulcinea? You write, possible Dulcinea, and hope for mercy. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Monasteries, especially in rural Europe, were major agricultural centers. Sheep weren't just animals. They were assets, providing wool, parchment, and meat. Tracking them precisely was part of both the economic and spiritual duties of the order. And your quirky tidbit? In some abbeys, monks did indeed name their animals, particularly those that were older, troublesome, or especially prolific. These names often matched saints, biblical figures, or, occasionally, fruits. There's at least one historical record of a sheep named Fig. Brother Alric walks among them now, murmuring names aloud. Benedict, Gertrude, possibly Jude the Lesser. He pauses at one sheep with a limp and sighs. Ah, Matthias, again. Apparently, Matthias has a thing for wandering off. You count carefully. Sheep with bells, 5. Sheep with red marks, 10. Sheep with neither but inexplicable confidence, 7. Your slate is filling fast. The wind picks up. A sheep sneezes on your boot. Brother Alric offers a handkerchief. Not for you, for the sheep. You glance at the scroll again and notice something odd. Each sheep not only has a name, but also a series of symbols beside it. You point. Alric nods. Wool yield, temperament, tendency to escape, favorite hymns. You pause. He does not elaborate. He marks a curly-horned ewe with a triple swirl and mutters, prone to heresy. Okay. You follow the monk up the hillside where a smaller paddock holds lambs, wobbly, adorable, terrifying in number. He hands you a string of beads. Decimal cord, he says. Each bead, 1 lamb. You begin sliding beads, counting aloud. But then one lamb hops away. You chase it, lose your place, start again. Historians still argue whether monks invented their own base systems for specific tasks. While Roman numerals were dominant, some evidence suggests monks used base 10, base 12, or even base 7 systems, depending on context. Livestock counting? Possibly duodecimal. Why? No one agrees. Perhaps because 12 divides nicely. Perhaps because it just felt right. You give up trying to make sense of it and instead let your fingers work the beads. Slide, count, slide, count. It becomes a rhythm, a lullaby of numbers. At the far end of the field, you spot one sheep wearing what looks like a small garland. Alric sighs. Eulalia. She thinks she's a novice. You don't question it. Eulalia trots past like she has prayers to attend. And as the sun begins its slow descent, casting a golden hue over the field, Brother Alric gathers the scroll, your slate, and the beads. 47 sheep, he says, plus 8 lambs, 1 blessed garland. He smiles. Full count. Then he leans in conspiratorially. Though we never count the black one directly. You glance toward the far hill. A single sheep, black as pitch, stares at you with oddly intelligent eyes.
Back inside, the walls feel warmer than they should. Not hot, just lived in. They've absorbed centuries of candle smoke, chants, laughter, and arguments about whether goats should be included in the wool inventory. Apparently not, unless the goat is especially fluffy. You follow Brother Alric through a side passage, past a chapel where a single bell tolls softly, and into a narrow room tucked between the kitchen and the cloister garden. It smells like wax, ink, and something faintly roasted. This is where they count the everything else. The room holds 2 monks, 6 ledgers, 1 large vat of drying ink, and exactly 73 candles. You know this because someone scratched the number into the wall with great ceremony. You step around a basket of onions to reach a central table where 2 enormous books lie open. One monk, thin and hollow-cheeked, dips a quill into a blackened inkwell. The other carefully stirs a pot of melted wax with what might be a butter knife. Together, they are counting supplies. Scrolls, rope, jars of herbs, bundles of flax, and, most importantly, candles. Monasteries didn't just count sheep, they counted light. Because when your work happens before dawn or after vespers, a candle isn't just wax. It's time, it's space, it's permission to see. Brother Oswin, the wax stirrer, points to a small wooden tally beside the candle shelf. It has 5 carved rows, each filled with pegs. You watch as he removes one peg with deliberate reverence. That's for the candle Brother Paul used to copy a hymn. Took 3 nights. He places the peg in a jar labeled Psalterium. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Medieval monks tracked candle usage meticulously, often allocating candles by task. Illuminators and scribes received more than those working outside. Entire ledgers were devoted to wax inventory. And your quirky tidbit? Some abbeys punished candle waste as a sin of sloth. There's record of one monk being denied plum wine for burning without cause. You eye your surroundings cautiously. Better not lean too close to any flames. Oswin flips open a wax-covered book and shows you a page with several curious diagrams. Circles, half-moons, a tiny sketch of what looks like a bear wearing a cowl. That's our inventory mark for beeswax from the mountain hives. You ask about the bear. Oh, he says without blinking, Brother Bjorn once kept bees. We honor his contributions. You choose not to dig deeper. Instead, you help tally candles one by one, as Brother Theodoric, the hollow-cheeked one, mutters Latin numbers and scribbles tiny lines in the margin of his ledger like it's the most solemn thing in the world. In a way, it is. Every candle burned is a calculation, a unit of time, a measure of devotion, a subtle resistance to the night. Monks didn't just live by the hour, they invented their hours. And when there weren't enough candles, they'd tell time by stars, shadows, or the slow drip of water in a basin with a hole at the bottom. Which brings us to the drip bowl. In the corner of the room is a ceramic dish filled with water. A single hole in the base lets it drip, ever so slowly, into a lower basin. One drip equals one breath. One full bowl equals roughly one psalm. Unless the wind shifts. Unless someone sneezes. You're told with great seriousness that Brother Jerome once tampered with the drip bowl to make evening prayers go faster. He was given extra onion chopping duty for a week. Historians still debate whether these alternative timekeepers were symbolic or truly practical. Some argue they reflect a yearning to control the uncontrollable, light, time, eternity. Others say monks just hated long sermons. The room grows darker as evening draws closer. You help Brother Oswin dip fresh wicks, twisting them slowly through beeswax and hanging them on a line. Each wick will become a future page, a future song, a future hour of whispered Latin under starless skies. You begin to understand. These monks didn't just count things. They held them. With care, with ritual, with the belief that no object is too small to matter. And as you pack up the ledgers and wipe the last smear of wax from your fingertips, Brother Theodoric adds one final line in the book. Visitor, 1 candle's worth. It's enough to make you blush. Until you notice the judgmental sheep has appeared again. This time in the window, watching, unblinking. Somehow it knows how many candles you touched. The night bell tolls again. This one's different, slower, lower. It echoes through the courtyard like a yawn wrapped in bronze. You follow its sound across slick cobblestones, past a row of rain barrels, and into a cloister garden humming with evening stillness. Here a novice monk waits. His robe is too long. His candle is too short. His name is Brother Simon, and he is very, very awake. He doesn't speak, but hands you a small wooden box and gestures to the sky. It's cloudless, crisp, the kind of night where you can see every star, and then realize some of them are probably just dirt on your eyelids. Brother Simon points to the stars, then taps the box. You open it. Inside, smooth pebbles, each with a faint symbol painted in ink. Sun, moon, bell, sheep, star, spiral. You blink. He taps the star pebble, then points to Orion climbing above the trees. And you realize this is how they're counting time. Not by hours, but by constellations. You take a seat on the low garden wall. Simon sits beside you, pulls out his own box, and sets the bell pebble in front of him. That was the bell you heard. Next, the sheep pebble. You wait. You wait some more. And from behind a hedge, like a clockwork miracle, comes the faintest ba. Simon smiles, slides the sheep pebble into the groove. This is the counting of the night signs. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Before mechanical clocks became common, monastic communities tracked time with bells, stars, hour candles, and natural rhythms. Specific monks were trained in astronomical observation to keep prayer cycles aligned. And your quirky tidbit? Some monasteries trained novices to memorize sequences of stars, not for navigation, but for liturgical cueing. When a certain star cleared the abbey roofline, it was time for matins. Others, compline. A few, time to rotate the beehives. Simon now places a spiral pebble on the wall. You ask what it means? He shrugs. Dream time, he whispers. Okay then. You lie back on the stone bench, the stars swimming above you. You start seeing spirals in the constellations too. There's a crooked line of stars that looks suspiciously like a sheep wearing a mitre, possibly Saint Lambicus. Simon reaches into his sleeve and pulls out a tiny hourglass. The sand inside is damp, slow, barely moving. He flips it once, then again, then sets it beside the pebbles like it matters more as a symbol than as a tool. You notice he's carved notches on the hourglass frame, tally marks. Each flip, he says, one hymn. You nod, even though you don't really follow. Historians still argue whether monks relied more on ritual than accuracy for timekeeping. Some claim precision was secondary to rhythm. Others believe they developed intricate systems out of boredom, necessity, or both. You're starting to think boredom might have been sacred. Simon hums softly. It's not a chant, it's not even a tune, just a rising and falling series of notes that vaguely matches the flicker of stars. He places the moon pebble in the groove. You hadn't noticed, but yes, the moon's risen behind the bell tower. It's nearly compline. You stretch, bones cracking gently in the chill. The candle stub flickers. Simon watches it, then adds the final pebble, a flame. He doesn't look at you, but whispers, "When the flame goes out, we sleep." You glance toward the door, and there it is again. The judgmental sheep. How did it get into the cloister? It stares, head slightly tilted, as if checking whether you remembered to count the pebbles in order. You give it a respectful nod. Simon does not react. You wonder if it only appears to visitors, or to those who lose count. The flame dances. You and Simon sit silently, each pebble lined up like a tiny stone psalm. And when the candle finally gutters, the world doesn't end. It just rests. You wake before the bell, not because you're ready, but because something changes in the air, an ancient kind of stillness, like the entire monastery is holding its breath. Outside, the stars are fading into a bruised blue sky. Somewhere, a rooster coughs apologetically. You roll off your straw mattress and make your way barefoot toward the refectory. It's empty, save for one monk seated at a long wooden table. He doesn't look up as you enter. He's busy counting turnips. Not metaphorically. Literally. They're spread out across the surface like relics. Some squat, some elongated, one shaped suspiciously like the abbot. He makes a mark in his ledger, then picks up a small knife, and slices one turnip in half. "Morning portion," he murmurs. You sit across from him. He slides a halved turnip your way like it's a consecrated wafer. Breakfast of champions. He finally introduces himself. Brother Leontius, turnip keeper. Not gardener, keeper. He's not just growing them, he's accountable for them. He taps a small wooden abacus beside his dish and begins sliding beads. Purple, white, white, missing. 3 harvested, 1 eaten, 1 relocated. You raise an eyebrow. He shrugs. Possibly stolen, possibly reincarnated. You crunch into your half turnip and pretend that makes sense. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Monasteries maintained detailed records of vegetable yields, turnips, leeks, onions, and herbs. Produce inventories were crucial to balance dietary needs, trade, and offerings to the poor. And your quirky tidbit? Some monks developed full calendars of expected root growth. They tracked not only what was pulled from the earth, but when it sprouted, when it split, and, yes, if it bore a face resembling Saint Jerome. Brother Leontius shows you the Book of Roots. It's exactly what it sounds like. 1 page per crop. Drawings included. Some are annotated, firm, unyielding, smelled of insight. You suspect poetry may have snuck in through the vegetable bin. After breakfast, you're invited to help with the turnip tally. Each one is weighed on a balance scale made from a repurposed thurible and a pewter spoon. Not exactly high-tech, but undeniably elegant. As each root hits the dish, a small chime sounds. You begin to enjoy it. Turnip, chime, turnip, chime. Then comes the golden one. Literally. It glows faintly, possibly due to some aggressive polishing. Brother Leontius looks at it like one might look at a miracle. "This," he whispers, "is Gregory." You nod solemnly. Gregory is weighed, recorded, blessed, and placed in a basket lined with wool. A bell is rung in his honor. You glance outside. The judgmental sheep is watching. Again. You wonder what its opinion is on root vegetables. Next, you're brought to the garden ledgers. Rows upon rows of entries. How many carrots? Which monk pulled which beet? What day the basil sprouted, and whether it hummed a hymn? Each page ends with a total, not just numbers, but feelings. Yield, sufficient. Spirit, strong. Mud level, acceptable. Historians still argue whether these notes were records or reflections, data or devotion. Some believe monks tracked the garden not to control it, but to converse with it. Brother Leontius closes the ledger. "Turnips don't lie," he says. You believe him. Mostly. The day stretches on. You carry baskets of roots to the cellar, marking each transfer with a chalk slash on the wall. You help string up garlic into garlands. You recite a short verse about the righteousness of cabbage. Then, as the sun reaches its peak, Brother Leontius takes you aside. He opens a small locked box. Inside, 6 beans. Ceramic, each painted with a different color and expression. He explains, "These are the counting beans of Saint Braxus." You raise an eyebrow. He shrugs. "Tradition," he says. Each bean stands for something intangible. Patience, frustration, surprise, sleepiness, rebellion, cheese. Each day, the turnip keeper chooses one bean to represent the mood of the garden. Today, he picks the one with the tiniest painted yawn, sleepiness. He places it in the jar labeled Seasonal Spirit. You ask what happens when the jar is full. We give.
After an afternoon of counting turnips, you'd think your brain would crave silence. But no, what it wants now is rhythm. You find it in the choir hall. It's late, the benches are mostly empty. A few monks linger, some humming, some dozing upright like medieval metronomes. But at the front, a small group of brothers gathers with solemn purpose. They are here to chant arithmetic. Yes, really. You slip into a shadowed pew as Brother Hubert, tall and spindly, steps forward with a lyre. Behind him, Brother Petros carries a slate marked with equations, not Latin scripture, not musical notation, numbers. Then comes the warm-up. Unus, duo, tre, quatuor. Each monk chants a number, their voices weaving together like a Gregorian abacus. It's meditation, oddly catchy, somewhere between bedtime prayer and a math-themed lullaby. Brother Hubert nods. Time to begin the full composition. The chorus breaks into a slow, lilting chant. Septem oves, due stellae, unum flumen, et nihil plus. 7 sheep, 2 stars, 1 river, and nothing more. You are mesmerized. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Medieval monastic communities often combined chant with memorization techniques. Some orders incorporated numerical chants to reinforce lists, biblical genealogies, or even inventory totals. And your quirky tidbit? There are surviving examples of arithmetical plainsong, music written to help monks remember tax records, flock sizes, or food allotments, sometimes accompanied by hand gestures resembling early sign language. Brother Hubert now conducts a fiscal fugue. The monks chant categories: panis, caesus, mel, bread, cheese, honey, and numbers: decem, quinque, duo. Their voices rise and fall like waves on a parchment sea. You close your eyes and can almost see the monastery's whole economy laid out in musical form. One monk, likely new, accidentally sings 12 where 10 should be. The others pause. All eyes turn. Brother Petros raises one eyebrow. Then, with great ceremony, strikes a small triangle bell labeled erratum. The monks sigh dramatically, then restart the verse. You stifle a laugh. You are learning mistakes here are not punished. They're marked, noted, folded into the rhythm of the day. The song continues. Soon, the chant turns to weather accounting. Quatur dies pluviae, una nox helu. 4 days of rain, 1 frosty night. Each monk adds a weather token to the small wooden board behind them, carved suns, moons, and raindrops, slid into their grooves. Brother Hubert hands you one, a tiny cloud. You slide it into place. It clicks, perfectly. The chant reaches its conclusion. The monks breathe together as the final line fades into silence. Et omnia numerata sunt, and all things are counted. They bow. You bow back, unsure if that's required. Brother Petros offers you the chalk slate. He says, try a verse. You hesitate, then write, duo turnips, unum ovum, tres mistakes. He nods, approving, then claps twice. All the monks applaud, a low, warm sound. Brother Hubert starts a slower chant now, this one without numbers, a closing hymn, but you can still hear the rhythm of counting beneath it. You lean back. The candlelight flickers along the pews, and you realize this is accounting as art, not just marks on parchment, but memory made musical. And when the chat finally ends, Brother Petros replaces the weather tokens into a cloth bag with extreme care. He ties the bag shut, bows to it, then places it beside the Book of Weights. No one questions this, including you. Historians still debate whether these numerical chants had any true mathematical value or were simply mnemonic devices, but many agree. In a world ruled by cycles of prayer, labor, and silence, song was a way to hold on to detail without speaking too much. As the monks file out, one pats your shoulder. Tomorrow, he whispers, we sing about fish. Of course. You step outside. The sky is dark again. The stars pulse faintly. And across the courtyard, yes, there it is, the judgmental sheep. You could swear it just mouthed the number 11. You follow the soft shuffle of sandals to a part of the monastery few seem eager to visit, the storage alcove, tucked behind the scriptorium. It smells like mildew and mystery, and it's just dim enough to make you question every creak. Inside, lit by a single wall candle struggling to stay upright, sits Brother Swithin. He's ancient. Not in a frail way, but in a probably remembers the construction of the first ledger kind of way. His beard is streaked with ink, and his fingers are stained a permanent shade of charcoal gray. He doesn't greet you. He gestures to a book. And not just any book. The Abbot's Inventory. You lean in. The leather cover is cracked, the binding stitched with gold thread. Inside, the ink has aged to a shade of brown that looks disturbingly like oversteeped tea. Every page is dense with numbers, columns, and tiny sketches of objects you wouldn't expect to find in a holy place, like a mechanical goose. Swithin raises an eyebrow. Everything is counted, he says slowly, even the nonsense. You begin flipping through the pages. At first, it's what you'd expect. Candles, sheep, hay bales, barrels of pickled onions. But then it gets strange. Entry number 143. One left boot, size uncertain, possibly Brother Thaddeus's, vanished during Lent. Entry number 192, 2 halves of a broken bell clapper, still chime faintly when insulted. Entry number 207, 1 owl, unclaimed. You glance at Swithin. He nods solemnly. Still here. Hates Vespers. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Medieval abbots kept ledgers that recorded not just inventory, but unusual events, donations, and community oddities. Some entries included descriptions of miracles, omens, or persistent rumors. And your quirky tidbit? A few abbey records include entire pages dedicated to objects believed to be cursed, including chairs, spoons, and in one case, an aggressively damp hat. You continue scanning. Entry number 261. 10 jars of plum jam, 6 accounted for, 2 consumed, 2 believed to have achieved sentience. Swithin closes the book with reverence. This, he says, isn't just a ledger. It's the monastery's memory. Then he pulls out a second book, this one thinner, more ragged. The cover reads, Things We Don't Count, But Should. You open it slowly. It's full of scribbles, guesses, and anonymous notes in multiple hands. How many sneezes occur during matins? Do the bees dream in hexagons? If a goat steps on the same stone every Tuesday, is it keeping time? There's even a crude drawing of a sheep wearing spectacles, labeled The Auditor. You don't ask. You just nod. And then you notice the back wall of the alcove. It's covered in chalk marks. Some are tallies, others are spirals. One corner simply says, Turnip 37, with a question mark that's been underlined 6 times. You add your own, a small symbol. Sheep plus music equals question mark. Brother Swithin grins. Ah, a philosopher. You stay for a while, helping him dust off obscure ledgers and sort through forgotten pegs in a box labeled Possibly Currency. Some of them are shaped like acorns. One jingles faintly when shaken. Finally, Swithin offers you a single object. A tiny stone sheep, carved crudely, but with unmistakable care. For balance, he says. You ask if it's counted. He replies, always. Then adds, even when lost. Historians still argue whether these odd entries were satire, record-keeping, or spiritual exercises in humility. Maybe all 3, maybe none. But clearly, for these monks, the act of recording, even absurdity, meant that nothing was meaningless. You step out into the moonlight. The courtyard is quiet. A single candle flickers near the well, and perched beside it is the judgmental sheep. But this time, it's joined by another. A second sheep, smaller. Matching stone in its mouth. It drops it. Clink. Then trots away. You bend down and pick it up. It's your symbol. Sheep plus music. You are officially counted.
The scriptorium beckons again, but tonight it hums with a different energy, not just parchment and ink, but suspicion. Something's amiss. Monks huddle in corners, whispering in Latin like worried accountants at a divine audit. You step inside and are immediately handed a ledger. It's thicker than the others, worn, heavily annotated, labeled in looping script, The Rule of Saint Benedict, Revised Edition, marginal notes only. Brother Matthias meets your eyes over a candle stub. He doesn't speak at first, just slides over a smaller, slim booklet titled Budget projections, Lent through Michaelmas. You blink. This isn't what you expected from monastic bedtime reading. Matthias sighs. We must always know what we have, even in silence. And then he taps a specific section of the rule book, chapter 39, on the measure of food. You read, 2 cooked dishes shall suffice. If fruits or fresh vegetables are available, a third may be added. Then, in the margin, +1 for feast day, -1 if Brother Gervasi cooks. Another note, if fish, then -cheese. Here's your mainstream historical fact. The rule of Saint Benedict, which governed most Western monastic life, included specific guidelines on food, clothing, tools, and even how much wine monks could drink. It wasn't just a spiritual guide, it was a logistical one. And your quirky tidbit: some copies of the rule book survive today with doodles, jokes, and annotations by monks who clearly couldn't resist adding their 2 cents, especially regarding food quantities. Matthias flips through the pages, revealing calculations beside nearly every rule. If 1 cloak per monk and 3 are mending, can Brother Odo have 2? Shoes, 12 pairs. Feet, 26. Problem: is it theft if I forget and eat an almond? You help him cross-reference the cloak inventory. Turns out 4 cloaks are unaccounted for. 1 was burned. 1 was gifted to a passing bishop. 1 became a curtain. And 1 is currently serving as a saddle for Brother Clement's very disobedient mule. Matthias dutifully records each, then sighs deeply and scratches out 12 cloaks and writes 8, technically. A bell rings in the hallway. Not the hour, not prayer. This one's different. The audit bell, Matthias mutters. You raise an eyebrow. Every quarter moon, he explains, we review the state of our souls and our storage. You're ushered to a long wooden table where various ledgers await. Beside each sits an object: a candle nub, a cracked spoon, a feather, a broken shoe. Each monk chooses an item, examines the related entry, and updates it. Brother Anselm picks up a spoon and solemnly notes, now cracked, holds 60% of standard lentil load. Brother Thomas lifts a broken sandal and writes, retired from foot duty, now curtain weight. Brother Jerome selects a moldy piece of cheese and murmurs, still edible if desperate, avoid. You're handed a piece of parchment with visiting candle usage at the top. You glance at your earlier entries. It says, guest. Candle burned 1.25. Matthias eyes you knowingly. There was some flickering. You nod gravely and adjust the figure to 1.3. Then underline it. Twice. Because numbers here aren't just measurements, they're morality. Historians still argue whether the rule of St. Benedict's attention to logistics stemmed from scarcity, spirituality, or both. But many agree its genius lies in the way it transforms daily necessity into divine order. You close the ledger gently. Matthias marks the candle stub beside him with a notch, then places it into a tiny drawer labeled Candle, Partial, but with Spirit.
He smiles. Not everything needs to be whole to be counted. As you leave the scriptorium, you glance behind you. A faint outline appears in the candlelight. At the far corner, where shadow meets ledger, yes, the judgmental sheep. But this time, it wears a very small, tattered cloak. Possibly curtain material. You swear it winks.
Dawn arrives with the kind of light that doesn't really care if you're ready for it. It slides in sideways through stone archways, poking at your eyelids and making the dust in the air look like golden pepper. You blink, yawn, and immediately regret sitting up. Your back is now a catalog of aches and knots. You're summoned, not by bell this time, but by Brother Arnulf's robust voice echoing from the courtyard like a goat herder trying to round up sheep that are also accountants. Today, he says, is the big tally. You ask, of what? He grins, of everything we've forgotten to count. Of course. He leads you into a side chamber rarely visited, half pantry, half vault. It's filled with boxes, each labeled with the unmistakable handwriting of several generations of monks. One reads, "Unreturned spoons, emotional value unknown." Another, "Partial beads, maybe prayer, maybe not." But the most prominent one, resting on a cracked pedestal, simply says, "The Cloak Ledger." Brother Arnulf explains, this is where it gets tricky. He unrolls a scroll so long it nearly brushes the dusty floor. It's a mathematical epic, chronicling who has worn which cloak, when, why, and for how many days. Each entry is a work of art. Brother Hugo, 3 days post-feast, slight gravy stain, removed for washing, returned with embellishment, possibly unauthorized. Brother Cedric, cloak use during storm, damage moderate, justification sheep chase. You try to follow the math, but the variables are bizarre. A full cloak counts as 1. 2 monks sharing a cloak counts as 1.25. A cloak used as a towel deducts 0.3 from its sanctity score. One equation literally reads, cloak times chill factor divided by number of laundry days equals borrow guilt quotient. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Cloaks were among the few personal possessions permitted in monastic life, and records were often kept to ensure proper distribution and maintenance. Each monk typically had 1 cloak, with exceptions granted during illness or extreme cold. And your quirky tidbit? Some monasteries tracked cloak lending incidents in dedicated ledgers, assigning guilt or penance for unauthorized borrowing, sometimes with humorous commentary written in the margins. Brother Arnulf lets you update an entry. You choose guest cloak usage 1 night, minimal breeze interference, no gravy, returned unscathed. He nods in approval. Now, he says, leading you toward a second ledger, we deal with the cloaks of memory. This one is abstract. It tracks not garments, but moments cloaked, things forgotten, miscounted, unacknowledged. You read, Brother Odo miscounted sheep by 1, confessed, forgiven. Sheep 34 may or may not exist. The apple audit failed. Nobody mentioned it. Apples disappeared. Reclassified as divine mystery. You add an entry. Guest misread candle stub size, inflated usage by 0.05. Self-reported. Arnulf writes beside it, and so is restored to the Book of Light. He pulls open one last drawer, tiny fabric swatches, each once part of a cloak, some threadbare, some impossibly soft. Every one still counted, he murmurs. He presses a swatch into your hand. Yours now. It smells faintly of lavender and suet. Outside, breeze kicks up.
The cloister garden is shimmering with dew, and the sun finally commits to its job. Monks begin emerging, stretching, blinking into the light like mossy sunflowers. One by one, they step up to the big board beside the chapel entrance, a slate marked with symbols, tokens, numbers, and what appears to be a drawing of a cow winking. They log meals eaten, pages copied, bells rung, candles burned, cloaks worn, and yes, moments remembered. You take your chalk and make your own mark. Just a spiral. Simple. Quiet. Arnulf sees it, nods, and without a word adds one more token to the box beside the board. A tiny carved sheep, painted faintly red. You glance to your left. The real one, the judgmental sheep, stands beside the herb garden. It does not blink. It does not graze. It just stares at the chalkboard. And you could swear for just a moment, it smiles.
You're halfway through a well-earned cup of barley tea when Brother Caldas bursts into the refectory like someone just told him they'd run out of ink. His arms are flailing, his beard is askew, his sandals slap the flagstone like over-enthusiastic punctuation. "We have a problem," he announces. The room stills. A cloak, 4 monks, 12 theories. You blink. So does your tea. Brother Anselm lowers his bread slowly. "Again?" Brother Caldas nods solemnly. You're recruited on the spot. Your mission? Investigate the cloak conundrum. The alleged cloak, gray, scratchy, bearing a small embroidered onion near the hem, has gone missing from the line behind the dormitory. In its place, a turnip. Fresh. Damp, possibly mocking. The suspects, 4 monks, all claiming partial use, none claiming ownership. You're led to an annex beside the kitchen, which has been hastily converted into an inquiry chamber, with a table, 2 chairs, and a cheese wheel no one is acknowledging. You begin the questioning. Brother Felix, suspect number 1, claims he borrowed the cloak briefly to fetch onions in the drizzle. He returned it, he insists, and distinctly remembers hanging it next to the abbot's socks. "I smelled nutmeg," he adds helpfully. "That's how I know." Brother Ian says he had the cloak first, but only as a placeholder while his own dried. He says it vanished when he went to get the psalm scrolls. Also, "I may have sneezed on it. That could matter." Brother Tobias confesses to using the cloak, but says he thought it was communal. Wasn't it the shared cloak, like the big ladle? You note, monks have a shared ladle. Brother Martin, the final and most dramatic of the quartet, claims he never touched it, but was framed by the sheep. You ask if he means the judgmental sheep. He blinks. Is there more than one? Here's your mainstream historical fact. In monastic communities, garments were tracked individually, but occasionally shared items, particularly during travel or times of shortage, would exist. These shared cloaks became the center of disputes more often than you'd think. And your quirky tidbit? Some abbeys had rules for garment borrowing that included penance for misplacement, recorded in ledgers with notes like "cloak relocated by wind" or "found worn by outsider goose." You examine the laundry logs. There is indeed an entry: gray cloak, shared, laundered after onion incident. That would be Brother Felix. But next to it, another scrawl: missing, replaced with turnip. Possibly metaphor. You retrace the route to the cloister garden, where the laundry line dances lazily in the breeze. The turnip is still there, perched on the wooden peg, smiling with leafy smugness. Brother Caldas appears with a small chalkboard. "We shall diagram the theories." He draws a cloak, 4 arrows,
several question marks, a sheep. This produces little clarity, but does impress a passing novice. Then you hear it. Bah! The sheep. It strolls into view. Cloak draped casually over its back, small, smug, embroidered onion catching the light. It walks slowly across the garden, tail swishing, the very image of unauthorized possession. Brother Martin gasps, "See?" Brother Felix runs after it. The sheep dodges. Ian offers it a carrot. Tobias sings a hymn about forgiveness. You write in the incident ledger. Cloak found, worn by sheep, monks in pursuit. Turnip still unresolved. Historians still argue whether incidents like this were common or just occasionally recorded for humor, but what's undeniable is this. Monastic life involved a deep intimacy with objects, each one labeled, recorded, and emotionally entangled with its users. By dusk, the cloak is recovered, slightly damp, covered in hay. Brother Culdus concludes, 4 monks used it, 1 sheep stole it, and 0 of us will forget it. You update the book of shared items. You note, 1 cloak, shared use, unexpected wearer, resolved without violence, may God bless the threads. And that night, outside your chamber door, sits the turnip. It's been placed gently, reverently, on a linen cloth. On it, in charcoal, "Thank you." You're barely 2 steps out the door the next morning when a novice monk, thin, nervous, smelling faintly of rosemary, presses a bundle of cloth into your hands and whispers, "The bell. You have to help with the bell." You are now, evidently, an assistant bell ringer. He leads you across the courtyard at a clip somewhere between reverent and panic. The bell tower looms overhead, framed by morning mist, its windows like sleepy eyes half opened. Inside, spiral stairs, lots of them. You climb, and climb, and climb. At the top, you meet Brother Alwyn, a wiry man with shoulders like kindling and a face carved by decades of wind and worship. He doesn't say hello, he just nods at the bell and hands you a rope. "Hold," he grunts. "Not too tight. Don't sneeze." He means it. The monastery bell doesn't just toll to mark time. It tolls to mark counts. Each ring means something. 3 for breakfast, 7 for psalms, 1 long, slow one for laundry day. And today? Today is inventory count. The bell will ring precisely 28 times, 1 for each category tracked this week, from wool and wax to turnips and quills. Brother Alwyn pulls a cord. The bell groans like it's remembering every mistake you've ever made. Gong. You flinch. He counts silently with his fingers. Then again. And again. You are on rope duty. Your job is to manage tension. If it's too tight, the bell swings too hard. Too loose, it stutters. It's less like pulling and more like negotiating with gravity. Here's your mainstream historical fact. In medieval monasteries, bell ringing was both spiritual and functional, marking the canonical hours, events, and practical schedules. Certain tolls corresponded to specific tasks or tallies. And your quirky tidbit? Some monasteries developed counting chimes, coded sequences of bell tones used to signify not time, but tallied items. For instance, 3 short rings might represent the number of sheep births that week. Brother Alwyn suddenly pauses. Lost count. You both stare at the bell. 14, you guess? He raises one eyebrow. 15. You nod, pretending you were testing him. You restart. By ring 22, your arms ache. By 25, your ears buzz. At 28, the bell lets out a final sigh, and Brother Alwyn pats its flank like it's a horse that just finished a race. Done, he says. The bell remembers now. You descend the tower, dizzy and slightly deaf, but glowing with purpose. Down in the courtyard, monks nod as you pass. Brother Cadwin holds up a chalkboard tally. 28. Each category listed, each box checked. You spot your name at the bottom. Guest, bell rope, partial use, error margin, acceptable. You beam with pride. Until you reach the cloister garden, where the judgmental sheep stands atop a pile of folded linens. It stares at you, then baws, once, loudly, then walks away. Brother Alwyn appears beside you. Sheep's the backup counter. Reliable? More than Jerome. That night, a brief ritual takes place in the chapel. The recounting prayer. Monks gather, each holding a token from the week, scrap of parchment, stub of wax, turnip leaf, candle wick, a pebble shaped like regret. Each one steps forward, places the item on the altar and speaks a number. 3 wool sacks, 17 lentils, 4 spoons, no casualties. Then a pause. You step forward. Hold up your item, a twisted loop of bell rope. 28 rings, 1 guess, no sheep complaints. The abbot smiles. You are blessed. Twice. Once with incense, once with what might be flour. And as you exit, the bell lets out one soft echo. No one pulled the rope. Everyone looks up, but no one is surprised.
By now, you're used to being handed things without explanation. So when Brother Edrin places a small wicker basket in your arms and says, "The garden awaits its reckoning," you don't even flinch. You follow him down a winding stone path, past a coop of chickens that look like they've seen things, until you arrive at the monastic vegetable garden. It stretches modestly between the cloister wall and a row of hedges, its soil dark and neatly sectioned like a patchwork quilt of purposeful dirt. This morning's assignment, the turnip audit, was merely the beginning. Now you'll be helping with a full produce tally. Every root, leaf, and sprout must be accounted for, Edrin explains as he hands you a thick, weather-stained ledger titled Yields and Miracles. You wonder which category you're about to enter. The garden is quiet, except for the occasional buzzing of bees and the rustle of wind through beanstalks. The monks move like ghosts among the rows, stooping, sniffing, occasionally whispering gentle encouragement to an anxious-looking cabbage. Edrin points to your first task, bean count. He hands you a wooden spoon. For scooping, he says. You begin. Spoonful after spoonful of waxy green beans go into the basket. For every scoop, you make a notch in your wax tablet. There's something oddly satisfying about it, like tallying is a kind of prayer. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Monasteries kept meticulous garden records, not only to track food yields, but also to align planting cycles with liturgical calendars. The health of a garden was considered a reflection of the spiritual health of the community. And your quirky tidbit? Some monks gave their vegetables names. Not all, just the particularly expressive ones. There's documented mention of Brother Parsnip and Lady Celery, both allegedly prone to wilting during fasts. You hear a chuckle from the carrot patch. It's Brother Mern, aged 90 if he's a day, squatting among the rows like an old squirrel. He waves you over and gestures at his ledger. Less a ledger, really, more a garden diary filled with doodles and affectionate complaints. He reads aloud, "Day 83. The squash continues to sulk. Gave it a stern talking to." You offer him a particularly plump turnip. He inspects it, squints, and announces, "That one's overqualified." You write, "Turnip, potential, high." Your next station is the herb spiral, where Brother Pax is using a feather quill to delicately record leaf count. Each sprig of rosemary is sniffed, stroked, and placed precisely in a little pile.
3 sprigs for bundle, 4 if feeling generous, 5 for visitors. He adds 1 to your pile. You ask if mint is tracked differently. Mint has opinions, he whispers. You don't press further. Next comes the grape arbor. Though calling it that feels generous, it's a wooden lattice with aspirations. A few brave grapes cling to life. Brother Simeon stares at them like a disappointed father. You record grapes, 12, 10 edible, 2 possibly decorative. Then comes the pumpkin tally, and you are warned, beware the twin gourds. No explanation is offered. You find them near the compost heap, conjoined pumpkins with a mysterious grin carved into one side. You look around. No one else acknowledges them. You record them as 1.5 pumpkins, unclear intention. Historians still argue whether these produce tallies were entirely practical or served a deeper metaphorical purpose. Some believe monastic gardens were viewed as living scriptures, each leaf a verse, each root a hidden meaning waiting to be unearthed. As you complete the final bean scoop, Brother Edrin hands you a stamp made of carved wood, an onion surrounded by a radiant sunburst. He says, "Seal the page." You press it into ink and stamp your tally at the bottom of Yields and Miracles. Official, certified, holy. You step back, admiring the results. Then, you see it. Near the parsley bed, standing perfectly still, a sheep. The sheep. Its gaze is fixed not on you, but on the freshly counted bean basket. You raise your hands defensively. It snorts, turns, and saunters away, but not before knocking over the twin gourds. They wobble, then settle in a new position, facing east. You glance down at the ledger. Add a final note. Bean count complete. Sheep disapproves. Gourds realigned.
You've barely finished tidying up the bean ledger when Brother Pascal appears beside you, breathless and covered in specks of pollen. He's wearing a netted hood and carrying what appears to be a tiny wooden ladder. "You're just in time," he says, "for the bee count." You follow him behind the herb spiral, past the sleepy grape arbor and into a sun-drenched alcove where the monastery's apiary buzzes like a library full of gossiping librarians. Hives sit in neat rows, painted in soft pastels, with little Latin phrases etched above each entrance. One reads, "Ora et apicula," or "Pray and be." The air is heavy with honey and soft whirring. You suddenly feel like an intruder at a very well-attended insect meeting. Pascal hands you a slate. "Each hive has a ledger," he says. "We'll be verifying occupancy." You stare at the hives. "He means count the bees?" He nods sullenly. "Well, not all of them, that would be madness, but we do count the sentinels." "Sentinels?" He points. At each hive entrance, a few larger bees stand guard, moving with more intention, their wings vibrating with authority. "These are the bees they count," he explains, "because they reflect the overall health of the hive. Also," he adds, "they're less likely to land on your nose if you're respectful." You take notes. Hive 1, 4 sentinels. Confident stance. Slight attitude. Hive 2, 3 sentinels. One appears distracted, possibly poetic. Hive 3, 5 sentinels. Very alert, whispered at you in hexagons. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Medieval monasteries often kept hives not only for honey, but for beeswax, critical for candles. Monks developed complex systems for maintaining and monitoring hive health, some of which included symbolic observation methods, like tracking behavior or bee personalities. And your quirky tidbit? Some monastic records include naming hives based on behavior, such as Saint Bosimus for a particularly productive colony, or Melancholia for a hive prone to abandoning its queen. Brother Pascal flips open the Book of Bees. You expected tidy tables, but it's more like a diary. Hive Lux, strong scent today, bees exited with confidence. Hive Gregoria, buzz usually harmonic, maybe composing liturgical anthem. Hive Jerome, 3 bees refuse to leave, might be fasting. You're assigned to hive basil, which has a slightly tilted roof and a small wooden saint affixed to its side with beeswax. You kneel. Wait. Watch. 3 bees emerge. 2 stand sentinel. 1 does a little dance. You report this. Pascal nods. That's the waggle of acceptable yield, he explains. Bees communicate through waggling. This one, apparently, is predicting a good clover season. You note hive basil, 2 sentinels, 1 waggle, morale high. Midway through the count, a commotion erupts. One hive, Hive Ambrose, has no sentinels. Pascal looks stricken. Again? You peer in cautiously. The bees are all there, just sleeping? Pascal chalks it up to a feast day hangover. He writes, Ambrose, no guards, possibly devout, or drunk on pollen. You see a leech entry with a wax stamp shaped like a bee. Each stamp goes into the bee ledger, and in the margins, small illustrations, bee halos, tiny wings, and one suspicious doodle of a monk being carried away. You glance across the garden, and there, by the lavender, the judgmental sheep, sniffing a beehive. You shout a warning. Too late. The sheep sneezes. The bees erupt. The sheep bolts. Monks scatter. Brother Pascal sighs. Every season, he mutters, he forgets. You revise your last note. Hive basil, 1 waggle, morale moderate, sheep triggered bee incident. Later in the scriptorium, you help Pascal draft the final bee report. Total active hives, 12. Estimated wax yield, sufficient. Noted disruptions, ovine. Historians still debate the reliability of bee tallies and whether monks truly used waggle dances to predict yield, but one thing is certain. Every movement in the monastery, even a bee's, was observed, recorded, and honored. You close the book of bees. Pascal smiles. Tomorrow, he says, we count fish. You sigh, because of course you do.
At this point, you've counted sheep, turnips, candles, bees, and even cloaks mistaken for turnip wrappers. So when Brother Owen beckons you toward the pond with a giant ledger labeled Aquatic Matters, you already feel the cool splash of inevitability. Today's task? The fish census. You arrive at the monastery pond, a wide mirror of water so still that it could be meditating. Lily pads bob lazily across the surface. Dragonflies flit like they're late for an appointment, and reeds sway in the breeze with the tired elegance of overworked scribes. Brother Owen hands you a long pole. For poking, he says solemnly. Gently. You look at the pole, then the pond. How exactly are we counting them? He smiles. We have methods. First comes the floating board method. He places a piece of wood sprinkled with breadcrumbs on the water's surface. Slowly, like summoned accountants in scaly robes, fish begin to emerge. 1, 2, 4. A cluster. Then what seems to be an argument over a breadcrumb. You and Owen note each appearance. Brown with spots? Check. Fat one with suspicious eyes? Check. Possibly same fat one again? Debatable. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Monastic fish ponds were vital to self-sufficiency, particularly during fasting seasons when meat was prohibited. Monks engineered ponds with inflow-outflow systems, and fish, especially carp, were bred, tracked, and sometimes named. And your quirky tidbit? Some monasteries trained specific monks as fish counters, complete with informal titles like Keeper of Scales. There are records of fish being listed individually, along with behavioral notes like leaps excessively or refuses to mingle. You now switch to pole-assisted counting. Owen gently prods beneath a patch of reeds. A ripple. Then a splash. Out pops a silver blur.
"That's Beatrix," he says solemnly. You stare. "You named them?" He shrugs. "Only the stubborn ones." A few more fish emerge. Beatrix again, possibly twice. Then a long pause. "Time for the net," Owen announces. "This is not for catching," he clarifies, "just nudging awareness." The net is dragged gently across one corner of the pond. The fish, likely familiar with this ruse, perform a few dramatic swirls for the benefit of the counters, then disappear. Owen notes, general attendance satisfactory, mood elusive. You begin recording. Silver carp, 6 visible, 2 repeat offenders. Golden fringe fish, 1 dramatic. Shadowy maybe fish, 3 uncooperative. As the sun climbs, Brother Owen brings out the mirror basin, a shallow bowl used to scoop and temporarily reflect the pond's surface for closer visual counting. You stare into the mirrored water. It shows not just fish, but sky. Owen mutters, "Sometimes the sky counts too." You write that down. Historians still argue whether these fish counts were precise or mostly symbolic. Some assert that monks counted to track sustenance. Others believe the fish represented abundance, patience, or even divine silence. You notice a tally carved into a nearby bench. Fish counted 73. Possibly 18. Possibly illusions. Owen's handwriting. The day ends with the great scooping, a ritual involving one wooden ladle and one extremely relaxed catfish. The ladle is dipped. The catfish, Beatrix again, nudges it gently and swims away. Owen claps once. Verified. You return to the ledger, recording, fish present, cooperative, brought own charm. Then a soft snort. You look up. The judgmental sheep is at the water's edge, staring at the fish. It dips its nose in. All fish scatter. It looks at you, then walks away. Owen sighs. Every week, she thinks they're just damp turnips. You make a final note. Judgmental sheep, present. Behavior, disruptive. Believes in fish as root vegetable theory. Back in the refectory, you find a reward waiting. A warm bowl of lentils and a single, mysterious biscuit shaped like a fish. You eat it reverently. Because, as Owen whispers, we count them, yes, but sometimes they count us back.
It begins, as many strange monastic days do, with a knock at your door. Not a tap, a knock with intent. Rhythmic, coordinated, almost rehearsed. You open the door to find Brother Antonius, tall, solemn, and wearing a hat that resembles a bread loaf with feathers. He holds a bundle of scrolls and a broom. Today, he declares, we count sounds. You wait for clarification. None comes. You follow him into the monastery's echo corridor, a long hallway of stone archways and wooden beams designed with acoustics in mind. Every step echoes. Every cough sounds like divine thunder. Every sneeze triggers theological reconsideration. Antonius unfurls a scroll labeled Sonus Monastique, the sounds of monastic life. It's time for the quarterly oral reckoning, he says. You blink. He hands you a tally slate. At the top, monastic sounds to track. 1. Footsteps, light versus heavy. 2.
Sneezes, solo versus chain reaction. 3. Door creaks. Record pitch if unusual. 4. Bell echoes. 1 ring equals 1 ripple. 5. Unidentified mumblings. 6. Incidental sheep. Yes, really. The corridor fills gradually with monks on their various duties, and you begin your listening vigil. Step, step, creak. You mark 2 light steps, 1 heavy, likely Brother Clement. He stomps with conviction, and 1 creak at middle C sharp. A sneeze echoes, then another, then another. Chain reaction. 3 sneezes equals 1 note in the ledger. Chili pepper incident, confirmed by sniffles. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Some monastic orders were so attuned to ritual that even daily sounds were recorded. Bells, chants, animal calls, used as subtle timekeepers and meditative cues. And, your quirky tidbit, a few abbeys assigned monks to oral stewardship, tracking sonic patterns, bell resonance, and unexpected interruptions. These were sometimes annotated with descriptions like holy echo or door possessed. Brother Antonius hands you a vibrating spoon. Door creak detector, he says, deadpan. It works. A nearby door whines open, and the spoon trembles gently in your hand like a particularly pious tuning fork. You log the sound. South door, 2-second creak, slight sarcasm. Antonius nods in approval. Suddenly, a distant clatter. 2 monks sprint past, one trailing scrolls, the other trailing what might be a goose. You write, unidentified mumbling. Goose adjacent. Back in the refectory, Brother Matthias drops a ladle. It lands with a clang that echoes down 3 corridors, through a cloister, and finally exits via the latrine courtyard. You write, ladle of echo, high morale. By noon, you've recorded 14 door creaks, 9 sneezes, 4 unacknowledged, 5 mutterings, 1 humming monk, possibly involuntary, 1 sheep bleat. At precisely noon, Brother Antonius marks that final one with a star. Right on schedule, he whispers. You glance out the window. There it is, the judgmental sheep. It stands under the bell tower, staring into the wind, having delivered its daily utterance. You suspect it does not appreciate being logged as incidental. You adjust your note. Judgmental sheep. Vocalization equals deliberate. Pitch equals authoritative. Echo range equals wide. As the sounds of the day dwindle, you follow Antonius to the resonance chamber, a vaulted alcove where he logs acoustic notes into a special codex, filled with musical lines and featherlight glyphs. He hums each creak before writing it. You assist by making little footstep icons with inked stamps. Each stamp is labeled light, medium, monastic, and definitely Brother Clement. The codex entry concludes with a poetic summary. 22 creaks, 12 echoes, 1 ladle with lingering guilt. He closes the book. And so, he says, the monastery remembers. You smile, then freeze. In the corner of the chamber, yes, the sheep. Inside. How? No one saw it enter. No one sees it now. You record. Echo anomaly. Faint bleat from within. No confirmed source. Sheep. Implied. You place the vibrating spoon beside the codex. It hums faintly. A final note on the ledger reads, days count. Not silent. Never random. Always Sacred.
The next morning greets you not with a bell, nor a sheep, nor even the comforting scent of barley tea, but with an egg on your windowsill, still warm, slightly speckled, balanced perfectly on a folded scrap of parchment that reads, "Today, fowl inventory." You open the window. Below, Brother Roderick stands with a notebook, a feather quill, and a rooster perched on his shoulder like a pirate whose treasure is breakfast. He waves you down. You join him in the avian quarter, which is less a formal courtyard and more a series of coops and semi-coherent fences scattered beside the vegetable beds. A few hens peck indifferently at the earth. One goose hisses like it's auditioning for a villain role. Roderick bows slightly. "Welcome to poultry accounting." He hands you the Book of Beaks. Inside, charts, pecking diagrams, feather loss tallies, and detailed egg logs marked with notes like soft shell, still edible, poetic. 2 yolks equal divine surprise. Hen Agnes delivered hers with theatrical flair. Today, you're on hen patrol. Your task: confirm head count, egg count, and general attitude. You begin. Hen number 1, present, clucking rhythmically, 2 eggs beside her, 1 cracked, 1 perfect. Note, 2 eggs, mixed messaging. Hen number 3, missing, coop empty, straw in slight disarray. Note, suspected wanderer, check cabbage patch. Hen number 7, brooding fiercely, growls when approached. Note, do not cross, possible ancient soul within. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Medieval monasteries maintained carefully documented poultry records as eggs were a critical food source, especially during fasting seasons. Some monks bred specific hens for egg reliability, often logging productivity by name. And your quirky tidbit? In certain abbeys, underperforming hens were assigned motivational chance or given more sunlight, while exceptionally productive ones might receive a name and their own tiny roost banner. Brother Roderick whistles softly. From the tool shed emerges a duck. It waddles with purpose. "Brother Cadfael," Roderick says, as if this explains everything. The duck marches directly to a ledger, taps it with its bill, and walks away. You write, "Duck number 1, literacy uncertain, timing impeccable." Egg count continues. You kneel beside a hutch and find an egg nestled in a monk's abandoned sandal. You note, unregistered laying site, possible protest. Suddenly, a squawk erupts near the fence. A chase ensues. A novice monk runs past, clutching a goose egg like it's the Holy Grail. Behind him, the goose in question, Goose Juliana, hisses with the fury of 1,000 unpaid tithes. Roderick sighs. Every time. You add, "Juliana, laid 1, reclaimed with vengeance." At midday, you assist with egg inscription, marking each egg with a tiny symbol to track the laying hen. Some are adorned with crosses, others with a line or dot system. You're handed a stylus. Your first egg, it gets a spiral. Roderick peers at it. Symbolic. You hope that's a compliment. Finally, the ledger is sealed with a wax stamp bearing the image of a small egg with tiny wings. As you're walking away, you pass the cabbage patch. Something moves. You investigate. There, nestled among the leaves, looking smug, hen number 3. It blinks at you. Beside her, 3 eggs. 1 is blue. You stare. You record. Hen number 3. Found. Cabbage loyalist. Delivered unexpected tricolor yield. You return triumphant. As the sun lowers, Roderick tallies the final count. Chickens, 12, plus 1 philosophical. Ducks, 2, including Brother Cadfael. Goose, 1, rage level
elevated. Egg count, 31. Unexpected nesting zones, 4. Honorably disruptive behavior, extensive. You write your name beside the note, guest assistant to the hen watch. Then Oz, because on the coop roof, perched like a woolly gargoyle, is the judgmental sheep. Holding an egg. You lock eyes. It drops the egg. You flinch. It lands softly in a straw bale. The sheep nods, then disappears behind the chimney. You make one last note. Sheep interference again confirmed. Motive unknown. Accuracy impressive.
You awaken to rain. Not a downpour, but the kind of steady, thoughtful drizzle that makes cloaks heavier and corners cozier. It patters gently on the roof above your chamber, echoing like soft footsteps from angels who forgot their umbrellas. A knock. Then the voice of Brother Thelonious, the monastery's weather-keeper. "Today," he calls through the door, "we account for the sky." Naturally. He meets you in the observatory loft, a room that feels less like part of the monastery and more like something it dreamed up one foggy night. Charts hang from rafters. A globe of stars spins lazily in one corner, and perched on a wooden tripod, the cloud register. Thelonious hands you a parchment marked with symbols. A cloud equals soft overcast. A thunderstorm equals angry sky sermon. An umbrella equals umbrella-worthy, though no umbrellas exist. And a sheep equals sheep-shaped cloud observed, bonus point. He opens a shutter. Outside, gray upon gray. He smiles. A full Type 1 sky blanket, excellent tallying conditions. You begin your atmospheric count. First, number of distinct cloud clusters. You estimate 12, or maybe 3 big ones pretending to be 12. Thelonious notes, clouds exhibiting cooperative behavior. Next, shade differentiation. Pale pewter, charcoal smudge, that weird one that looks like spilled ink. He hands you a sky stick, a long dowel painted with gradient tones of gray for precise matching. You point. That one's level 7, worried monk. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Some monastic communities maintained weather chronicles, meticulously tracking rainfall, frost dates, and cloud types. These records were used to guide planting, prayer, and even adjust feast schedules. And your quirky tidbit? One surviving weather log includes a drawing of a cloud that looked like St. Michael holding cheese. It was considered a minor omen, one that foretold unusually smooth dairy production. You check the wind gauge. A string with a feather tied at the end. The feather dangles straight down. "Calm," he whispers reverently. "The sky is thinking." You nod. He draws a symbol. "Sky indecision," he explains. "Very rare." Next, raindrop rhythm analysis. You both close your eyes and listen. Thelonious counts out loud. Drip, pause. Drip, drip, pause, drip. He writes pattern, contemplative hesitation, not aggressive. You sip rainwater from a collection bowl. Note, tastes of rosemary. Possibly blew in from herb garden, possibly divine suggestion. Then comes the big moment, cloud shape interpretation. You lie on your back staring upward through a skylight pane. A blur shifts, then takes form. A spoon, you suggest? Thelonious squints. I see St. Sebastian's elbow. You agree to record both. then gasp. Is that a sheep? Indeed, a woolly formation floats gently across the sky. It looks exactly like the monastery's favorite four-legged observer, possibly judging, possibly snoozing. You log Cloud ID number 7, ovine resemblance, strong, emotional aura, faint superiority. He stamps the form. It's official. The cloud has been counted. Suddenly, thunder murmurs in the distance. Not a boom, more of a polite throat-clearing. Thelonious sighs contentedly. Sky commentary. We've been acknowledged. He marks the moment in the sky ledger, complete with a time, wind direction, and small drawing of you with a surprised face. You finish by checking the dew index in the cloister. Brother Calmest hands you a sock. Put this on the stone bench. Wait 2 minutes. You do. The sock is damp. Calmest nods. The stone speaks. You record. Dew level, sock confirmed moisture, bench compliant. Historians still debate the accuracy of monastic meteorology. Some say it was proto-science. Others, poetry disguised as agriculture. All agree. Few observed the sky as reverently as monks with time, patience, and a feather on a string. As evening settles, the drizzle fades. The sky turns from gray to lavender, with streaks of gold, like hesitant brushstrokes. You make your final entry. Rain measured. Clouds identified. Sky surveyed. Sheep present in cloud and corporeal form. And just as you close the ledger, you hear it. One single baa from the rooftop above. You glance up. There, silhouetted against the clearing sky, the judgmental sheep. Backlit. Majestic. Slightly damp. Possibly glowing. You write nothing more. Some things go unlogged, not because they lack meaning, but because they've already been witnessed.
Today begins not with a knock, nor a bell, nor even a sheep-related interruption, but with something far more terrifying in its subtlety. A note slid under your door. The handwriting is cramped, spidery, and written in walnut ink. It reads, "Report to the cloister archives. Bring a calm spirit and gloves." You do as instructed. The archives are tucked beneath the chapel, accessible only by a creaking staircase lit with wall sconces that flicker grammatically, as if contractually obligated to spook newcomers. The door is thick oak, the hinges so old they practically moan. Inside, the temperature drops 3 degrees. You are greeted by Brother Cuthbert, the monastery's most formidable archivist. His beard is long, his expression unbending, and he wears 3 pairs of spectacles on his head simultaneously, each more powerful than the last. He hands you a bundle of scrolls. "Today," he intones, "we count the past." You are now in the ledger of ledgers. Each book here records older books. Every scroll logs earlier scrolls. There are entire shelves dedicated to pages that list other pages, some of which are now missing, and noted as such in subsequent volumes. Cuthbert gestures to a dusty tome labeled Scrolls Misplaced in 1173, and possibly before. "Check for updates," he says. You nod. Inside, you find entries like Scroll number 44, borrowed by Brother Anselm, not returned, possibly eaten by goat. Scroll number 97,
fell behind bookshelf, recovered, misfiled again, now a bookmark. Scroll number 112, used for kindling, no remorse recorded. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Monastic communities were known for their painstaking record-keeping, with archivists maintaining not only books, but indexes of books, borrowing logs, and even notes about marginalia. And your quirky tidbit. Some monasteries logged every instance of a book being moved, sometimes including comments like, "moved due to draft," or "relocated after Brother Thomas claimed it made him sneeze." Cuthbert points to a shelf labeled, "The Incomplete Register." Your job? Reconcile. You pull books, scrolls, wax tablets, and even one record written on a piece of linen. It's a slow process, unrolling a scroll only to find it's been annotated with gossip about beekeeping scandals. You log it anyway. Scroll number 212. Diversion from liturgical norms, relevant to apiary studies. You reach for a thick codex titled Index of Candle Usage by Margin Width. Yes, really. Each page outlines how much candle wax was consumed while copying specific texts. Narrow margins equals quicker copying equals less wax. Efficient, Brother Cuthbert grunts, nodding. You help him tally. Candle units per psalm, scribe fatigue rates, in size per hour, ink usage by prayer type, petitions required extra loops. One note reads, "Brother Giles over-inked Amen thrice, possibly passionate, possibly distracted." You update the ledger with new findings, including scroll number 89, recovered behind chest, slight goat nibble, now classified as textual fragment with texture. As you sort the final pile, you discover an envelope, sealed with wax in the shape of a hoof. Inside, a single parchment. It reads, "Scroll X, the true count of the monastery, witnessed, not written." You look to Cuthbert. He nods. "We all find it eventually." You flip the parchment. Nothing on the back. No numbers, no entries. Just a faint outline of something woolly. You don't record it. You just place it gently back in the envelope and mark the entry as Scroll X. Exists. Contents uncertain. Sheep implications. Probable. Cuthbert, satisfied, stamps the ledger. Recorded. Outside, the storm has passed. The stones feel warmer underfoot. And at the top of the staircase, you spot a trail of muddy hoof prints. Just one set, leading in and out. You write one final note for the day. The past is accounted for, even when it walks away.
You're sipping tepid nettle tea by the cloister fountain when Brother Silas approaches carrying a box, a ladder, and the unmistakable glint of someone preparing to do something mildly dangerous in the name of monastic order. He gestures for you to follow. Today's mission? Count the forgotten bells. Not the main bell up in the tower. That one's already been tallied, chimed, and blessed 6 times this week. But the small bells, the ones scattered throughout the monastery like bronze breadcrumbs of sound. Most people don't notice them. That's the point. Brother Silas calls them the micro-chimes. You follow him first to the kitchen door, where a thumb-sized bell hangs from a rusted bracket. Every time it rings, it's supposed to signal that bread has risen. You flick it gently. It tinkles. You nod. It is counted. You mark it in the minor bell inventory. Bread bell, functional. Volume, whispery. Mood, encouraging. Next,
The bell of misplaced tools. Hung above the shed, it's rung only when someone finds a tool that someone else pretended wasn't lost. You ask if it gets rung often. Brother Silas just raises an eyebrow. At the back of the library, there's a bell of dropped scrolls. Monks are expected to ring it once if they drop a scroll, twice if they pretend they didn't, and 3 times if it falls into ink. You ask if anyone ever rings 3? Brother Jerome, Silas mutters, every Wednesday. Here's your mainstream historical fact. In some medieval monasteries, bells were used not only for major liturgical functions, but also for smaller daily signals, like waking up, lighting candles, or beginning meals. Some bells had highly specific purposes and were tracked separately. And your quirky tidbit? One abbey recorded a bell of awkward silences, rung discreetly to indicate an uncomfortable conversational pause during refectory meals. It was rarely acknowledged, but universally respected. Next, you climb the ladder to inspect the bell of bees, a tiny silver chime attached to a post near the apiary. When the bees swarm too dramatically, someone rings the bell to let them know they're being observed. It's unclear whether it works. Silas rings it anyway. The bees ignore him. You record, bee bell, rung, no change. Moral authority, limited. You move on to the laundry bell, which signals that socks have been reunited with their missing partners. Silas confides that it hasn't rung in years. It's symbolic, he says, a monument to hope. At the infirmary door, you find a bell shaped like a tulip. It's used to request extra blankets. You ring it once. Brother Thelonious appears almost instantly, hands you a blanket, nods, and vanishes. You look at Silas. It's muscle memory, he shrugs. Back in the chapel garden, you discover the bell of regrets. It hangs from a fig tree. Monks ring it when they remember something they forgot to record. You both ring it once, just in case. Then you reach the final bell, the unlabeled one. It hangs beside the stable, tarnished, half-sunken ivy.
You're deep in a dream involving a juggling bishop and a goose choir when someone softly places a pair of gloves on your chest. You blink awake. It's Brother Gerwin. He speaks only 2 words. Dust count. This is not a metaphor. You're now in the scriptorium lower vault, a narrow, dim corridor beneath the library, lined with ancient scrolls, fragments of codices, and the general aroma of parchment dreams and mildew ambition. The walls seem to inhale as you pass. Gerwin hands you the dust ledger. Yes, it exists, and yes, it's thick. The task? Log the presence, color, texture, and spiritual implications of dust accumulations on select sacred shelves, particularly those untouched since the winter of the Year of Excessive Cheese. He gestures to a column labeled Particle Zones of Notable Neglect. You start with Alcove 3B. Dust. Soft, dove gray, light as breath. Contains a single curled hair. You note, dust purity, 84%, likely monastic. Hair origin, inconclusive. Alcove 4C, dust mottled with golden flecks, possibly candle residue, possibly ancient bees. You hesitate, then write, dust with ambition, possibly luminous. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Medieval scriptoriums took preservation seriously. Dusting was part of routine manuscript care. Dust itself was sometimes analyzed for insects, wax, or mold, all enemies of sacred text. And your quirky tidbit? Some scribes developed a habit of writing micro-messages in dust, such as tiny prayers or sarcastic commentary, knowing only the curious would ever find them. You discover one now. Scratched faintly into the dust of shelf 7D. I told them to dust this before Lent 1171. They didn't. Signed, Brother Eno. Disappointed. You laugh quietly. Gerwin raises an eyebrow. You show him. He nods solemnly. Eno was particular. At one shelf, you find a dust formed in concentric circles. Gerwin frowns. Worrying. He notes it as intentional dust geometry, possibly sentient. At another, you uncover a small stack of coins coated in fluff. You flip the top one. Underneath, a drawing of a sheep. You don't ask. You just write, monetary offering, sheep motif, dust level, devotional. Gerwin assigns you to feather watch, a practice wherein old quills, once used for sacred copying, are inspected for dust layering. A heavy layer suggests they've fulfilled their life's work. A clean quill? Suspicious, Gerwin mutters. One feather you find has a single dustless stripe, as if recently gripped. You check the usage log. Last signed out 3 years ago. You record, ghost scribe suspected, feather elegant, residue reverent. The monastery is abuzz with an unusual kind of energy today. Not quite excitement, but certainly anticipation with sandals. Brother Petronax approaches you at breakfast with a gleam in his eye and a potato in his hand. Inventory day, he says dramatically, for the things that do not stay where we put them. You raise an eyebrow. He gestures toward the courtyard, where a long wooden table is being set up beneath fluttering banners. Atop the table, mismatched candlesticks, a carved walking stick, an hourglass filled with barley, a boot with moss growing from it, and what appears to be an experimental spoon-fork hybrid. Welcome to the Great Misplacement Census. Petronax explains the rules. Each object on the table has been found in a location distinctly not its own. Your job is to help trace its last 5 locations, determine how it got there, and log its behavioral profile. You begin with the hourglass. Originally used in the library for timing prayers. Last spotted, 1, inside the beehive, covered in pollen. 2, hanging from the laundry line. 3, inside the goose pen, survived. 4, under the abbot's chair, briefly used as a doorstop. 5, on the chapel altar, during a misreading of Hour of Vespers. You record, item, hourglass, mobility, high, intentionality, debatable, spirit, restless. Next, the mossy boot. Petronax claims it was once Brother Osric's, but Osric insists his feet never wore such dramatics. You follow the trail. 1, boot rack. 2, garden. 3, pond, briefly. 4, choir loft, mysterious. 5, above the door to the cheese cellar, witnessed by 3 monks and a sheep. Here is your mainstream historical fact. Many medieval monasteries tracked object movement via informal ledgers or marginalia, especially tools, robes, and writing materials. These records often became colorful chronicles of absent-mindedness and accidental creativity. And your quirky tidbit?
Some items earned nicknames and reputations, like the Wandering Fork or Brother Benedict's baffling hat, and were believed to have chosen their path. You move to the spork, a recent innovation by Brother Ludo, who insists it's revolutionary. Its recorded locations: 1. Refectory. 2. Pigsty, dropped during philosophical lunch. 3. Top of bell tower. Why? 4. Inside the vegetable ledger. 5. Beneath your own bed. You have no idea how. You stare at Petronax. He nods. It seeks recognition. You write, spork, invented, resisted, roamed, still misunderstood. By mid-morning, the table is full of monks taking turns recounting the travels of things. One recites the epic journey of a comb that was found inside a loaf of bread, stuck to a candle, attached to the judgmental sheep's ear, briefly, unintentionally fashionable. You mark it as comb, object in crisis, likely seeking purpose, unclear if sheep approves. Then comes the scroll weight, used to hold down parchment. Except this one has been found in the kitchen as a truffle presser, in the garden propping up a shy cabbage, in Brother Gervais's pocket, unknown reasons, inside a soup pot, unforgivable, and finally, nestled in a basket labeled possibly important rocks. You write, scroll weight, disrespected, courageous, undeniably resilient. Petronax unrolls the official Log of Wandering Objects, a parchment too wide for one table and full of marginal illustrations, eyes on forks, exclamation points next to spoons, and a suspiciously detailed rendering of the sheep wearing a crown. Which brings you to the final item, a cracked wooden tablet with tally marks carved deeply into its surface. The marks vary, some neat, some frantic, one shaped like a fish. No one knows what was being counted, or by whom, or for how long. It's simply labeled, Count Unknown. You write, tablet, found beneath candle drawer, numbered, possibly haunted, sheep seen nearby. Historians still debate whether misplacement logs were spiritual metaphors or practical necessity. Some believe wandering objects were viewed as animated by divine nudges, teaching lessons about attention, humility, and shared responsibility. You complete your final tally. 34 items. 17 returned to their rightful places. 7 placed in a to be continued bin. 10 labeled unresolved, observed, loved nonetheless. And as you carry the bin back to storage, you find the judgmental sheep napping beside it. Head on the spork, content. You add one final line to the log. Sheep, present at closure. Role uncertain. Probably administrator.
There's a quiet murmur in the halls this morning, like the walls themselves are trying to break some gentle news. You find Brother Alaric waiting for you in the cloister, clutching a bundle of linens and a scroll labeled in florid script, Monastic Injuries, Minor, Mostly Embarrassing. He offers no greeting, just raises a brow and says, ready to help with the bruise census. You are now an assistant in the Minor Mishaps Registry. Today's work, documenting every stubbed toe, bumped head, quill poke, splinter, and dramatic but unserious injury sustained in the monastery this moon cycle. You're handed the Register of Bumps and Oopsies, a thick ledger containing names, injury sites, cause, consequence, optional embarrassment rating. First up, Brother Wymond, who sheepishly admits to walking into the same door 3 days in a row. You inspect the record. Door, North Chapel entrance. Collision frequency, concerning. Result, bruised dignity and eyebrow. You mark the injury as mild, recurring. Door, possibly vengeful. Next, Sister Elfrida, who tripped over a goat while carrying herbs. The goat was napping. She shows you a small scrape And a bundle of mint she never dropped. Herbs unharmed, she says proudly. You note injury, knee, cause, sleeping livestock, resolve, impressive. You're then handed the splinter scroll, a rolling document of every monk who has incurred a wood-related jab this quarter. One note reads, Brother Ardo, splinter under thumbnail while contemplating the Psalms. Severity, mystical. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Monastic infirmaries kept in-depth health records, even from minor incidents. These logs were essential not just for care, but for tracking patterns, slippery stones, overused stairs, or quills that turned traitorous. And your quirky tidbit? Some injuries earned nicknames like the Great Ink Spill Incident or Tumble by the Fig Tree, which were spoken of solemnly in refectory gossip for months. Brother Alaric gestures toward the chart of monastic anatomy hanging on the infirmary wall. It's shaped like a gingerbread monk, with labeled body parts and tiny icons for injury types. Toe stubs, stars, head bumps, little clouds, back aches, squiggles, mysterious rashes politely ignored. You help him update the chart. Brother Nestor approaches, pointing to his elbow. Laundry line duel, he whispers. You raise an eyebrow. Clothesline snapped, robe flapped, I fell with dignity. You nod solemnly. Injury, arm, incident, fabric rebellion. Dignity rating, 7.5. You're then introduced to the bandage ledger, where monks note not only who received a rap, but what scripture was read during application. Brother Hugo's most recent rap includes Psalm 147. He heals the broken-hearted, Hugo says, showing off his bandaged thumb. You write, thumb, quill splinter, psalm, appropriately chosen. As the sun moves across the cloister, you visit the stumble map, a diagram of the monastery with little colored pins indicating where people have tripped or bumped into things. The most flagged location? The hallway near the fig tree. Reason? Slick when contemplative. You add a pin. At one point, a novice appears cradling a small basket. Inside, a slipper. It launched, he explains. I was sneezing. You try not to laugh. He adds, I fell, landed on Brother Codfile. Brother Codfile fell, landed on Goat. Goat, fine. You record, chain event, high comedy potential, no major injuries. Finally, you're handed the emotional bruise scroll, a more poetic ledger where monks record moments of non-physical injury, like accidentally forgetting a feast day or being corrected mid-chant. Brother Alaric has an entry. Called the wrong saint in morning prayers, Saint Dymphna instead of Saint Dominic. Echoed through the chapel. 3 monks snorted. You log it, spiritual misstep, blush intensity, moderate, forgiveness assumed. As evening nears, the final tally is read aloud. Stubbed toes, 11. Splinters, 7. Head bumps, 4. Goat-related events, 3. Unexplained bruises, 2. Emotional mishaps, 5. Total embarrassment index, manageable. And then, a bleat. You turn. The judgmental sheep. Standing beside the stumble map. You blink. There is now a new pin near the herb garden. You look at Brother Alaric. He shrugs. The sheep was there when Brother Paschal slipped on sage. You write your final note of the day. Sheep proximity, statistically correlated with minor chaos. Also, helpful with map updates. You close the register of bumps and oopsies. Grateful. Sore.
And of course, counted.
It's just past dawn when you're awoken by a chime, not a bell, not a knock, but a single spoon pinging against a clay cup, followed by a solemn whisper from behind your door. Time for the soundless count. Of course it is. You meet Brother Alban in the chapel vestibule. He wears soft felt slippers and carries a tablet of wax, a candle stub, and a length of string. He speaks only in whispers now. This is the day where we count what cannot be heard. You are about to become a practitioner of the silent inventory, an ancient exercise in recording absences. He gives you a list of the day's subjects: unstruck bells, unspoken prayers, candles that burned without witness, pages turned without rustle, footsteps that did not echo, sheep that did not bleat. Your role is to accompany Brother Alban through the monastery and mark these moments of intentional stillness. First stop, the meditation cloister, where monks sit with hands folded, eyes closed, and mouths gently pursed in that vaguely suspicious way that makes you wonder what theological debates are unfolding behind their brows. You wait for someone to cough. No one does. Alban nods, and you make the first tally. The wind carries the scent of distant apples and nearer laundry, a mixture that somehow spells inventory season continues. You step into the courtyard and find Brother Morris waiting for you with a clipboard, a chalk stick, and a look that says today will be surprisingly educational. "Ready for the shadow count?" he asks. You pause. He points to the ground. "Every shadow cast by monastery architecture today must be logged. Shape, length, movement, unexpected behaviors." You are now a shadow surveyor. He hands you the chalk of recording, a simple piece of chalk wrapped reverently in linen, and a chart labeled Monastic Silhouettes and Temporal Ghosts. Your job? Track each major structure's daily shadow drift across the grounds. Part science, part spiritual art form. You start with the bell tower shadow. It stretches elegantly across the flagstones, bisecting the herb garden like a sundial designed by a moody poet. You mark it at 18 paces, note its tip resting on a patch of thyme, and record bell tower shadow, morning stance, dignified, intimidates sage plant. You move to the chapel cross, its silhouette falling on the wall with exquisite symmetry. You notice one arm is slightly shorter due to a pigeon resting on the actual crossbeam. You record cross shadow, adjusted, divine geometry plus bird. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Some monastic communities, especially those with astronomical inclinations, tracked sun positions and shadows to monitor time, seasons, and spiritual alignment. These measurements help determine feast days and optimal times for planting or fasting. And your quirky tidbit, in rare cases, a shadow's behavior, such as elongating earlier than expected, was taken as a sign, prompting extra prayers or the cautious movement of a cabbage planting by half a day. Brother Morris takes you to the refectory wall, where the kitchen chimney casts a flickering shape as smoke dances above it. The shadow looks like a hat, or possibly a bishop arguing with a cloud. You mark chimney shadow, semi-anthropomorphic, possibly grumpy. You head toward the laundry line where drying robes sway and flutter. The shadows beneath them shiver. You try to measure, but one robe lifts in the wind and smacks your chalk from your hand. Brother Morris retrieves it. Laundry spirits, feisty today. You write robe shadow, evasive, possibly resentful of scrutiny.
At midday, the judgmental sheep wanders into the yard. Its shadow joins the bell towers. For a moment, the tower seems to wear the sheep like a wig. You say nothing. You record everything. Sheep shadow merged with tower. Unclear symbolism, possibly coronation. You draw a small crown. Moving to the garden wall, you trace the shifting silhouette of an overgrown fig tree. Its branches curl in fractal patterns across the stone. Brother Morris murmurs, "The tree's been speaking lately." You nod, not sure if he means metaphorically or horticulturally. You trace the limb shadows anyway. Your notes grow more poetic. Branch lines, like veins, or memory paths traced in sun. Then the monk cloister loop, an internal walkway with columns casting perfect verticals. You step between each, one by one, counting them like silent metronomes. You write 28 columns, 28 shadows, like the ribs of a sacred breath. As afternoon wanes, you revisit the tower. Its shadow has moved, no longer in the herbs, now pointing at the sheep. Again. Coincidence? You begin to suspect an alliance. You write, "Tower and sheep, cooperative arc. Shadow aims? Unclear, possibly forming a sundial cabal." The final measurement of the day is taken at the wellhead, where light filters down in angular bands. You peer over. Its shadow reaches towards the center like it wants to climb out. You draw a sketch and log, "Well shadow, spiral tilt, depth unknown, dreamy." As the sun begins to dip, you and Brother Morris gather the shadow chart. You've recorded 17 distinct architectural shadows, 6 reactive object shadows, 1 dramatic robe flare, 3 pigeon interruptions, 1 sheep of uncertain intention. He stamps the scroll with a wax seal shaped like a sun. You pause, then add a final quiet line. Today's light recorded, its absence appreciated, nothing cast without meaning. And as you roll up the parchment, you turn to see the judgmental sheep, bathed in amber light. It stands between 2 columns, casting 2 shadows. One short, one unusually long. You glance at the sun, look again, only 1 shadow remains. You record nothing more. Some shadows are not meant for tallying.
Brother Tolan finds you brushing crumbs off your robe and hands you a spool of twine, a wooden square, and a scrap of parchment titled "The Widths of Things." "Today," he says, "we measure the invisible boundaries." You blink. He smiles. "Yes, space itself, or rather, the space between things." This is not geometry in the usual sense. No, this is the ancient and curious monastic practice of spatial humility, a soft science dedicated to calculating how much room something thinks it needs versus how much it actually takes. Your tools? A measuring cord, a breadth ledger, and a soft wax stamp labeled "wide enough." Your first stop is the novice corridor, where cloaks hang side by side on pegs that clearly do not get along. Brother Tolan asks, "Are the cloaks at peace with each other?" You step back. One cloak bulges, the other slumps. You measure 3 fingers of fabric overlap. You note cloak conflict at pegs 3 and 4. Space encroachment. Personality clash likely. He nods gravely. You move on to the narrowest step, a stair tread so slim it's rumored to have caused 17 near-ankle incidents and 2 spiritual revelations. You measure the width, just wide enough for half a sandal. You log Step 6, minimalist in ambition, barely functional, monk hazard elevated. Here's your mainstream historical fact.
Some monasteries embraced spatial rituals, measuring walkways, benches, and even elbow distances at tables to foster harmony and reflection. The idea was that shared space required measured respect. And your quirky tidbit? There are records of monks getting into polite disputes over invisible monastic borders, like where one person's sitting mat ended and another's began, even in silence. You pass through the scriptorium alcove, where two desks are so close they form an accidental alliance. You note Desk A encroaching with quill sprawl, Desk B retreating with meek inkwell. Boundary negotiated via size. You add to the ledger, tension visible in parchment crease pattern. Recommend bookmark barrier. Outside, you measure the distance between cloister columns, all identical except one. Column 14 leans slightly left. Its space leans with it. You trace its shadow. Column 14, spatial rebellion, affectionately forgiven. Then Brother Tolan guides you to the refectorium, where the distance between spoons on the main table is under scrutiny. He gestures to the ladles. Symmetry is next to sanctity. You measure 3. 2 are perfect. 1 has clearly been nudged by a hungry hand. You record ladle drift, motivated by lentils. No formal complaint filed. Then comes the goat path, a winding trail between the garden wall and the laundry line. It wasn't designed, it simply formed. You walk its route, measuring the way it flows between things. It weaves, it dodges, it has opinions. You write, path exhibits instinct. Width varies with purpose, possibly goat designed. At the storage cellar, you're asked to measure shelf gaps. One jar of lentils has nudged the honey jar so closely that their shadows have merged. You record, food intimacy detected. Label, jar friendship. No intervention necessary. Near sunset, Brother Tolan shows you the final space, a small wooden bench by the garden wall. Only one person may sit at a time. But next to it, an identical bench. And between them, exactly 12 inches of air. Who's supposed to sit there, you ask? No one, he replies. That space is sacred. You measure it anyway. 12 inches, warm from the sun. You write, invisible seat, honored, never occupied, often felt. And then, as you gather your tools, a familiar sound. A soft shuffle, a breathy exhale. You turn. The judgmental sheep approaches. It stops at the invisible bench and lies down exactly within the 12-inch space. Tolan says nothing. You say nothing. You simply write, sheep, seated, boundary respected, spatial humility achieved. The sun slips low, shadows lengthen, and today's log ends with, all things measured, all gaps honored, nothing pushed too close, nothing left too far.
You find yourself summoned, not by bell, knock, or sheep this time, but by the subtle drift of incense smoke curling under your chamber door. You open it to discover Brother Laurentius, wrapped in his ritual cloak, a bit too long, trailing dramatically, holding a small brass censer and a scroll with gold lettering, "Today, the Count of Forgotten Smells." You are now a scent archivist,
This is the monastery's most esoteric census. You and Laurentius are to catalogue the ambient aromas of the entire abbey, particularly those no longer noticed. It's not what stinks, it's what gently haunts the nose, he explains. You're handed a parchment titled The Olfactory Ledger, divided into origin, time of detection, strength, faint, persuasive, devotional, and notes, optional metaphor encouraged. First stop, the candle room. The air is thick with beeswax and smoke long since cooled. You inhale. Note. Scent, beeswax memory. Strength, faint, evokes patient prayer and extinguished hope. Next, the vestments closet. Smell, must, linen, a whisper of lavender from years past. You write, cloak ghosts, smell of winter sermons, time trapped in threads. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Monasteries often maintained herbal and aromatic inventories, using incense, fresh herbs, and dried flowers to purify air, disguise animal scents, and enhance spiritual moods. And your quirky tidbit? In some orders, monks assigned spiritual value to scents: lavender for peace, frankincense for clarity, bay leaf for memory, and would record unexpected fragrances as divine hints or mischief from saints. Laurentius takes you to the kitchen hearth, where today's stew is gone, but something lingers. Celery ghost, he whispers. You nod. Stew echo. You log. After scent of roots and slow-boiled contentment. Strength, persuasive. Essence, earthy resolve. Then, the old hymnals. They smell of parchment, thumb oil, dust, and a dash of ink long dried, but still opinionated. You note, scent, theology in decay, faint, sharp, slight note of judgment. Laurentius leads you to the garden tool shed, where the air carries iron, soil, and forgotten sweat. One shovel smells distinctly of mint. How, you ask? He shrugs. Buried a mint bush once. Never recovered. You log, tool memory, mint sweat fusion, scent stubborn, shovel sentient. The ink room carries the smell of inkstone, sheep parchment, and the subtle tang of concentrated frustration. Brother Alban is hunched over a text, muttering at a particularly rebellious G. You record, ink bitterness and monkly muttering, scent devotional impatience. You pass the lavender corridor where sprigs were once hung seasonally. Now only the wood remembers. You sniff. Yes, still there, like a sigh. You write, residual lavender, hidden peace, strength, hopeful echo. Suddenly, Laurentius stops. He raises the censer and wafts it gently toward the west wall of the chapel. You both pause. A breeze, faintly, very faintly. Toast? You look at him. He nods. Brother Osric once left bread in the reading lamp. It happened 4 winters ago. You log. Smell of forgotten toast. Strength, phantom. Mood, mischief. Preservation, legendary. Then, the laundry stone, still damp from morning scrubbing. It smells of soap, river water, and slightly of sandalwood, someone's robe perhaps. You kneel, smell it directly. You write, scent of clean purpose, faint undertone, secret luxury, possibly abbot's towel. You reach the last stop, the abbey's silent nook, a tiny chamber under the stairwell. Laurentius gestures for you to breathe, deeply. At first, nothing. Then, cold stone, ancient rain, dust from centuries, and a faint wisp of sheep. Of course. You write, scent of wool apparition, strength subtle, time travel adjacent. You close the ledger. Laurentius seals it with resin-scented wax and a sprig of thyme. Smells, he says, are the memories of things that never speak. You nod, and as you walk into the courtyard, you see it, the judgmental sheep standing near the herb garden. It sniffs the rosemary bush, snorts, walks away. You follow, and where it stood just moments ago, a single bloom of sage. You log nothing, but in your mind, smell, sheep-warmed sage, strength, lingering, meaning, undetermined. And in that quiet space between breaths, the monastery holds its nose with reverence.
A folded scrap of parchment awaits you at breakfast, delicately placed on your bowl of barley porridge. It reads, "Please report to the West Garden for the Count of Whispers." You blink, once, twice. The barley stares back, innocent. You find Brother Serapion in the West Garden. He is hunched beside the hedge maze with an ear trumpet made of copper and a smile that suggests he's heard secrets you wouldn't believe. "Today," he says with hushed delight, "we record the quietest voices. You are now a whisper cartographer. The rules are simple. Listen. Record anything too soft to matter, except it does. Mark the origin, tone, and emotional flavor of the whisper. Your tools: a velvet-lined notebook, a goose-feather quill so sensitive it quivers with nearby gossip, and a flask of mint tea to sharpen your ear chakras. Brother Serapion's words, not yours. First stop, the herb beds. There you kneel beside the sage. A breeze stirs the leaves. You swear it sounds like someone sighing in ancient Latin. You record, sage murmurs, possible conjugation of to steep, emotional tone, wistful. Next, the fig tree. A bird hops among its branches, silent. But something else. You lean in, a low hum, deep and velvety. Brother Serapion mouths, "That's the fig remembering sunlight." You nod, because that makes a concerning amount of sense. You write, "Fig tree whisper, memory of ripening, volume, glacial lullaby." Here's your mainstream historical fact. Certain monastic gardens were built with acoustic sensitivity, designed to amplify natural sounds for meditation. Even soft rustles and ambient echoes were considered part of a sacred soundscape. And your quirky tidbit? Some abbots documented suspected whispers from inanimate objects, including cloaks, drafty muttering, stones, grumpy, and soup bowls, melancholy, possibly bean-related. You crouch near the compost heap, expecting little, but in the amidst the turning leaves and soft decay, there's a whispery chuckle. You glance at Serapion. He shrugs. Old lettuce sometimes jokes about its glory days. You write, decomposing greens, ironic. Whisper register, leafy banter. At the fountain, the water drips with no urgency. You listen for patterns. Then, yes, a repeated rhythm. Not speech exactly, but a suggestion. You note, water whisper, gentle insistence. Theme, let go. By the cloister wall, you sit near two monks napping in the sun. One mumbles in sleep, half smiling. You catch just a fragment. Turnip choir. You write, dream whisper, joyful, content ambiguous, but root vegetable adjacent. Later, you encounter the library door, always a bit creaky. Today, it creaks, then pauses.
then creaks again. A double pause. Serapion whispers, "It hesitated. That means it's thinking." You record. Door whisper. Contemplative. Possibly requesting oil. Intelligence? Emerging. Behind the candle altar, you find burned stubs arranged in a crescent. One flickers faintly, unlit. A whisper lifts, soft as a memory. Almost a flame. You breathe it in, then write, "Candle echo, hunger to relight, tone, yearning." Serapion leads you finally to the wool room, where robes are stored, aired, and occasionally argued with. You enter in silence. You hear it. A brush, a rustle, a breath between folds, and then, yes, a whisper. Judging. You spin. No one there, except the sheep. Standing in the hallway, watching. Not bleating, just watching. You record, "Sheep whisper detected. Content, unspecified disapproval. Volume, sufficient." You lower your quill. Serapion, grinning, offers you a fresh leaf of vellum. Today's count? You tammy. Plant murmurs, 4. Object whispers, 3. Animal opinions, 1. Woolen. Untraceable size, 6. Emotional flavors, wistful, curious, grumbly, and 1 smug. You write at the top, whispers tallied, non-hallucinatory. And at the bottom, silence is never empty. It just speaks softly. As you return your tools, you notice the sheep is still watching. But now, it nods, and then walks away. The grass beneath its hooves stirs ever so gently, whispering something you'll never quite hear, but will always remember.
You awake to find a soft feather tucked behind your ear, and a small piece of parchment resting on your pillow. It simply reads, "One more count, the uncounted things." You find Brother Crispin standing beside the chapel well, holding a scroll without ink and a quill with no nib. "The uncounted cannot be written," he says, "but they must be acknowledged." You nod solemnly. You are now engaged in the inventory of the intangibles. What follows is a wandering, a pilgrimage of the non-numeric, the undefinable. Today's task is to record everything that resists measurement and yet demands presence. First stop, the morning light in the refectory. It enters through stained glass, scattering across bowls, spoons, foreheads, and bread crusts. There's no way to measure it. Still, you write in your invisible ink, light, golden at first spoonful. Duration, unknown. Warmth, gentle. Meaning, yes. Then comes laughter. Brother Berenger chuckles quietly to himself while peeling an apple. No one knows why. No one asks. It's the 3rd time this week. You log. Laughter. Subtle. Solo. Peel-assisted. Echo. None. Impact. Sweet. You visit the hymn hall, now empty. But in the air, resonance. A harmony still drifting from yesterday's evensong. You can't hear it fully, but you feel it on your arms, like goosebumps made of sound. You note, song residue. No longer note, not yet silence. Comfort's wood grain. Here's your mainstream historical fact. In many medieval monasteries, monks believed that intention, memory, and grace filled spaces long after physical actions ended. They made mental room for things that could not be touched, but were undeniably present. And your quirky tidbit? A few orders kept ghost ledgers, or ledgers of else, where monks were invited to write about things that happened in spirit only,
Moments of inspiration, strange dreams, smells that evoked past lives, or the mood of fog. In the cloister, you pause and breathe. Someone has just passed through, though no one is there. Still, the air remembers. You write, recent kindness, possibly brother Thelonious, scent of beeswax, texture, kindness. At the garden bench, you witness a leaf letting go of a branch, not falling, just choosing departure. You don't record the time. It doesn't want to be timed. You write, departure noted. Not an end. Wait, none. The abbey cat brushes your shin and continues without stopping. You log. Moment of connection. Cat facilitated. Duration, exactly enough. Near the library, you find an old quill tucked into a crack in the stone. It's not useful, not even fully there, but someone once left it, and someone else once didn't take it. You write, shared decision across time, value, emotional, ink, memory-based. You pause at the threshold of the quiet room, a place never entered with shoes nor exited with anger. No one is inside, but there is peace seeping out under the door. You write, peace seeping gently, has no edge, fills what we give it. Then you return to your own chamber. Someone, perhaps you, has smoothed your blanket. A tiny crease shaped like a hill remains. You stare at it, feeling strangely homesick for something that hasn't happened yet. You write, future memory, unnamed yearning, folded neatly. And as the day draws down, you walk once more to the field's edge. The wind is low. The sun is unsure of staying. And there, as if on cue, the judgmental sheep. It looks at you and does nothing, says nothing, just is. You sit beside it, not to count, not to think, not even to witness, just to join the uncounted. In your final invisible entry, you write, sheep, presence, meaning, not for me to know. But I felt it. And under that, all uncounted things welcomed, all unnamed things known, all forgotten things held.
You wake on your final morning to find a feather pressed into the seam of your journal, a thimble of cool water beside your bed, and, most curiously, a folded robe that isn't yours. There's no name stitched inside, only a faint scent of lavender and dust. You put it on. It fits perfectly. Today is the final ledger, the ceremonial end to the month-long census. You've counted sheep, whispers, bruises, shadows, dust, bells, footsteps, and absences. Now, as the sun rises, the monastery gathers beneath the cloister arches. Brother Abel, the oldest monk by at least 1 century, though time seems uncertain around him, steps forward with a scroll bound in purple twine. He nods at you. Please, he says, log the count of having counted. And so you begin. You sit at the center of the stone courtyard with your leather-bound notebook open, surrounded by the quiet rustle of robes and distant sheep breath. You count pages filled, moments captured, objects weighed in silence, laughter that never made a sound, the pauses between echoes, the memories stitched to shadows. You write, count complete, 29 days, 29 layers of seeing, 29 ways to pay attention. You walk through the cloister one last time, your steps soft but firm. Brother Tolan hands you the measuring twine. Brother Gerwin offers a dust cloth, now neatly folded.
Brother Laurentius simply smiles and passes you a sprig of sage. You return all these items to their proper places, noticing the subtle way each space now feels slightly fuller, as if the act of counting gave the monastery a new spine. In the scriptorium, you leave behind a single mark on the chalkboard. Everything seen. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Monks believed in completion as both ceremony and offering, not to show mastery, but to release the need to master. An ending, in their eyes, was simply a change of rhythm. And your quirky tidbit? In some traditions, a sheep, yes, an actual sheep, was led through the cloister on the final census day, as a symbol of presence, patience, and divine comedy. And wouldn't you know it, just then the judgmental sheep appears in the doorway. But this time, it's not judging. It walks slowly, ceremoniously, right to the center of the courtyard. It looks at you. It sits. And then, against all odds, it bleats.